Good morning. My name is Lorraine Jacobs, and Mark Miller and I are the co-chairs of Sunday Morning Forum Planning Group. We welcome you this morning and thank you for supporting the Sunday Forums. For over 50 years at First Unitarian Society, Milwaukee, the Sunday Forum Lecture Series has showcased speakers of interest to our members and friends. Forums are 1 hour in length and provide a presentation followed by questions. Scheduling and hosting these weekly programs is accomplished by volunteers. The presenters do not receive honoraria. The content of each forum may not always align with the viewpoint of First Unitarian Society, Milwaukee. They are meant to offer topics which can be pursued further independently by those attending. Before we begin today, I'd like to remind you that next Sunday, January 30th, our topic will be Fighting Climate Change at Home with Kevin Kane, Chief Economist of the Green Homeowners United. And today, we welcome Clarence Johnson, Executive Director of the Wisconsin Community Services, and he will be introduced by today's forum host, Gus Pointer-Mace, who is representing the youth at the First Unitarian Church. Gus, it's your turn.
Hello, I'm Gus Pointer-Mace, and I am the chair of the Youth Steering Committee at First Church. Today's speaker at the forum is Clarence Johnson, who has served on over 20 nonprofit boards and has lived in Milwaukee for his entire life. Currently, he is the executive director for the nonprofit Wisconsin Community Services, where he has expanded programming and impact, including working towards justice and community safety, expansion of shelter care, and mental health services. Welcome, Mr. Johnson.
Good morning, Gus, Lorraine, Bruce, and others. Thank you for having me this morning. I appreciate the chance to do a short presentation to your at your Sunday forum on a social justice issue topic, in our case, organization. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I think I should be able to bring up my PowerPoint, and if for some reason I can't, I'm going to ask Lorraine to give me a hand. So bear with me. Let's start here if we can, and boom. Okay, and I'm also going to try to, let's see if I can start this. Yes. I was hoping to get, I guess, a larger presentation here. So,
way on the left, it says from beginning or from, there you go.
Yeah, got it. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And again, thank you for having me this morning. I appreciate the chance to present. My name, as Gus has indicated, and Lorraine, is Clarence Johnson, and I'm currently serving as the President and CEO of Wisconsin Community Services. That's a recent title change, actually. Up until about a month ago, I was the Executive Director, and we revised our bylaws, and accordingly, there was a title change in the position that I hold, and so I'm now President and CEO. It'll take me a while to get used to that. So what I'm going to do is provide a history and overview of Wisconsin Community Services, WCS. I'll call it WCS. I will say, use the acronym probably most often. And I should also begin by saying that I've been with WCS for about almost 12 years, serving as the ED and now President and CEO for the past a little over 5 years. And I've been involved in social services for my entire professional career. In fact, I started my career at WCS many, many years ago, and had the good fortune to return to the agency, as I said, about 11 years ago. So really very proud to have spent a lot of my career with WCS. So a little bit about our history. Wisconsin Community Services was founded in 1912 as the Wisconsin chapter of the Society for the Friendless as part of a national movement by the Congregational Church. The early focus of the organization was to work with law offenders and assisting family members of those who were incarcerated. One of the early leaders of the organization was the Reverend James Parsons, and we have a facility named after Reverend Parsons called Parsons House, located on 25th and Locust. In 1924, the work of the society was headed by Ruth Baker, who happened to be the daughter of Reverend Parsons, and the first board of directors was convened in 1924. A little bit more history. In 1927, the Wisconsin chapter merged with the Bethlehem Star to leverage funding from the Community Fund, and the new agency became known as the Wisconsin Society for the Friendless. And the Community Fund, by the way, is actually the original name of what's now known as United Way of Greater Milwaukee and Waukesha County. In 1941, the organization was incorporated as a nonprofit, and the new name was adopted, Wisconsin Service Association, or WSA. In 1965, Irvin Heinzelman became the executive director of WSA, a position that Irv held for about 33 years. In 1968, the agency changed its name to Wisconsin Correctional Services, WCS. And in fact, when I worked for WCS years ago, it was then known as Wisconsin Correctional Services. In the 1970s, WCS started a pretrial release program that was supported by United Way, validated an effective bail risk management system, provided casework staff to Milwaukee Methadone Clinic. And in 1973, a Waukesha office was opened, and mental health services were started also in 1976. In 1978, WCS opened Baker House, the first privately contracted pre-release center in the state of Wisconsin. In the same year, WCS began to offer outpatient treatment services to individuals who had significant mental health needs. A little bit more about the long-term and recent history. In 1981, WCS began to provide employment and placement services at the Milwaukee County House of Correction for Huber inmates and persons with criminal records who had a difficult time finding employment. And we also, in 1982, opened a mediation center in Waukesha County, along with beginning to provide services for the Milwaukee Municipal Court Services. In 1986, Parsons House opened. They initially served juveniles, so not adults right away, but served individuals who were under the age of, at the time, 21. In 1989, WCS began offering drug testing services for pretrial defendants. A little bit more about our long-term and recent history. In 1991, the Thurgood Marshall House opened to serve men returning from incarceration. This was obviously known as a halfway house. And in 1994, WCS began serving adult reentry residents at Wings for females and Parsons House on 25th and Locust. In 1996, a Milwaukee County coordinated conditional release program started for persons in state institutions who were determined to be not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. It's a program that we still operate. And in 1998, Steve Swigert was named as the executive director of WCS. And Steve, who I knew very well, by the way, served until 2006. Unfortunately, Steve passed away about 6 years ago. In 2003, Wisconsin Correctional Services changed its name to Wisconsin Community Services. So we kept the acronym. Everyone called us WCS, but wanted to get rid of the correctional. We have had a long-term relationship with the State Department of Corrections, but the challenge that we had is that people oftentimes thought that we were a part of the state correction system, and so we wanted to shift that perception, keep the acronym, and focus more on the fact that we provide a lot of community-based services for individuals. And so we changed our name to Wisconsin Community Services, WCS. As WCS prepares to celebrate its 110th year anniversary, the organization has seen significant growth and expansion since 1970, the last 50 years or so. And to give you a little bit of a sense of what that looks like, for example, in 1970, the organization had a budget of about $75,000 and about 10 employees. So pretty modest growth, quite frankly, for the first 50 plus years of the organization's existence. By 1990, the number of staff had increased to 200 with an annual budget of about $7.3 million. So pretty significant growth just over a 20-year period of time. And by 2001, the number of staff grew to about 290 with an annual budget of about $16 million. So almost doubling in budget size over the 10-year span of time and adding significantly more staff. By 2016, the number of staff is at about 270 and the annual budget is about $24 million. And today, 2022, the organization has about 470 staff, a few more actually, and a budget of about $44 million. So a lot of growth over the last 50 or so years compared with the first 50 years of our existence. So what is the mission of WCS? I think Gus alluded to it a little bit earlier. WCS advocates for justice and community safety, providing innovative opportunities for individuals to overcome adversity. Our philosophy of care incorporates a strong set of values and emphasizes strength-based programs, being trauma-informed. We all hear so much about the impact that trauma has on the lives of people who, really all people, but certainly a disproportionate level of those who are in underserved and under-resourced communities. Community-based, person-centered care or person-centered practice, culturally competent services, while always remaining being mindful of community safety, which is obviously so important to all of us. And all of our programs are built around the aforementioned system of care and services. And our core values that we hold very near and dear: justice, pursuit of excellence, and respect. So what are the goals of the organization? They include, they speak to our community impact and our focus of our work. They include to provide children, youth, adults, and families with quality services that are effective, welcoming, compassionate, and responsive. To promote services and approaches within WCS. In the broader community that provide hope and opportunity for people with substance use, mental health, or co-occurring needs, to promote a culture of accountability that empowers individuals to meet their own needs and contribute to a strong and healthy community. To focus services, partnerships, and advocacy on the underlying causes of involvement, the child welfare, justice, and behavioral health systems, and to ensure that the development of WCS programs and services is based on quality data, evidence of effectiveness, research, and the voices of the individuals that we serve. So those are very, very important to the organization. Let's see, next slide here. So a little bit about our board and our staff. I've alluded to some things earlier. We have a board of directors of about 15 individuals, predominantly African-American. As you can see, 9 African-American, 5 white, 1 Latinx. Our current board president is Ms. Lynn Menifee, an African-American, and Lynn is a recently retired manager from the Sojourner Family Peace Center, and she currently serves as a community volunteer. And of course, you all are very familiar with the work that Sojourner Family Peace Center provides in our community. Our staff, again, which I've alluded to earlier, has approximately 470 individuals. 70% of the staff are classified as full-time. 58% of the staff are people of color, and about 50% of the staff are African-American. Many of the staff, including myself, have been with the organization for over 5 years. And in 2020, WCS provided services to about 14,000 individuals in Southeast Wisconsin. So this is a chart for an organizational structure. It gives you a sense of how we organize, at least at the top leadership level in our programs, although I will tell you that WCS this year will be going through a bit of a reorganization. So we'll look a little different than this over in the next 3 months, but this is how we're structured now. And again, you have myself and then I have an associate executive director, that's Sarah Carpenter, support staff here, and let's see, I'm trying to get to our program areas, which I don't see. Let's see, where are those? I think they're underneath that little box, actually. So I'm going to go on to the next slide, which is a little bit better. So WCS is focused on providing services and programs to underserved communities and populations in Southeast Wisconsin who face adversity, often with justice system involvement and unmet behavioral health needs, and walking with them on a self-directed path to improve the quality of their lives, leading to stability and wellness and recovery. And this is what I was trying to show you with the org chart. So we really have 4 operating or 4 programmatic divisions at WCS, and this is where the services are provided. The first is Behavioral Health Services Division, which assists individuals in need of treatment or services due to their mental illness, drug or alcohol use, or combination of those which are called co-occurring disorders. And then also the second division is the Community and Reintegration Division, which provides programs that work with individuals who are transitioning back into the community after a period of incarceration. So obviously a very important part of what we do. And the WCS Court Services Division helps individuals to fulfill their legal obligations and provides the opportunity for them to make life changes. In this particular program area, I think Gus also alluded to this earlier, oversees a Milwaukee Youth Shelter program and our Project Excel programs, which we call our Milwaukee Youth Program. So for our shelter program, we have two youth shelters, one for females and one for males. And these are temporary residential non-secure care for kids who are in what's called a pre-adjudication phase. They're involved with the youth justice system, and in many cases they can't quite return home, and they're not appropriate for a stay in the Children's Court Detention Center. And so we provide temporary, short-term, non-secure care for them. And then the fourth division is the WCS Specialized Services Division, which we created about 4 or 5 years ago. And really, it's been the driving space for a lot of the expansion and budget and programs that we've experienced over the past 5-6 years. And this division was designed really to provide innovative, high-quality mental health, substance use, and co-occurring and recovery services to children, young adults, and families. A little bit more about specialized services, as I was highlighting a moment ago. As I mentioned, created in 2007 to build capacity for a lot of the growth that we were anticipating experiencing, and that has actually come to fruition. And some of the programs that have been created over the past 5 years include Bakari House Residential Treatment and Youth Crisis Stabilization Program. This facility is located on 32nd and Hampton, and it provides, again, a combination of youth residential treatment, or RCC services, as we call them, and a youth crisis stabilization program for kids who are experiencing a mental health crisis. So these are all young people under the age of 18. The Youth Crisis Stabilization Program, the average length of stay there is about 5 days. It's a voluntary program, and it's a place for kids to go who are in a mental health crisis, versus the Bakari Residential Care or Treatment Center component, where it's a 6-month program focused on providing what's called dialectical behavioral therapy treatment and multi-systemic treatment for kids and their families. And then also the CLASP program, which is a community linkage and stabilization program for adults primarily who are being released from from the inpatient mental health hospital who need assistance transitioning back into the community. The Hub and Spoke program, which is a relatively new program, opened in June of 2021. It's a Medicaid entitlement or funded program that's designed to provide long-term services to people who have significant substance use disorders and a co-occurring mental health need or physical health need. And that program is located at 27th and North Avenue. Outpatient Plus in Sankofa House, designed to be a level of care that is just above outpatient, but just below traditional residential treatment. And so the outpatient treatment services are provided at our clinic on 37th and Wisconsin Avenue. And Sankofa House is a recovery house, which is a clean and sober living environment located at 17th and Atkinson. Our unlimited potential outpatient clinical services, which I just mentioned. And then we have started providing an array of children's mental health, also known as wraparound programs, RAP, REACH, CORE, and Youth CCS. And then also Office of Consumer Affairs, which provides peer support services, again, for people or adults who are transitioning back into the community from the inpatient mental health hospital or for one of the crisis stabilization houses. So these are all largely really what I call publicly funded programs for individuals who largely reside in underserved, under-resourced communities and need the services of an organization like WCS. Just to give you an idea of some of the licenses that the organization holds. These are all, DHS is an acronym for the Department of Health Services. It's a state department. A 35 mental health outpatient clinic license. The DHS 50 is our youth crisis stabilization program. DHS 63 is our community support program, CSP. DHS 75 is associated with our Joshua Glover Residential Reentry Center, which I'll talk about in a minute. DHS 7513 for an outpatient treatment, substance use treatment program, that's unlimited potential. And we have a similar license also at our day reporting center, which is located at 10th and Highland. And then a DHS 83 license certification for community-based residential facilities, which is our Parsons House at 25th and Locust. A similar license for Joshua Glover. And then a DCS, or the Department of Children and Families, for our residential care center, Bakari, at 32nd and Hampton. And DCF 54, our treatment foster care, our child placing agency, license also, operates out of 27th and North Avenue. Excuse me. DCS 59, our shelter care program, Bahia House, that is our girl shelter program, and then DCF 59, which is our boys shelter care program called Rashid. So what are some of the sources of funding for WCS? There are 5 or 6 primary sources of funding. The largest is Milwaukee County. And then we have a significant amount of Medicaid funding as well. Funding from the state of Wisconsin. Funding from the federal government, which is largely for our Parsons House program. It's funded by the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Other counties besides Milwaukee, which includes Waukesha, Jefferson, Kenosha, and Manitowoc. And then we also derive participant fees from individuals who may pay a fee for electronic monitoring services that we provide as well in Milwaukee, Waukesha, Manitowoc, and Kenosha. And United Way, I'm sorry, WCS, of course, is the United Way of Greater Milwaukee and Waukesha County funded organization. Locations in the Milwaukee and Waukesha communities. Our primary location is at 3732 West Wisconsin Avenue, where you will find our administrative offices. That's where I reside. That's where I have my office. Our TCM, which is an acronym for Targeted Case Management. It's a program that provides services to persons with mental health needs, as is our CSP, an acronym for Community Support Program. WCS also operates a pharmacy out of that building. We've operated a pharmacy rather for the past 40 years. And it serves individuals who are receiving services from WCS, so it's not open to the public. Though we are contemplating offering the pharmacy services to our staff at some point in 2022. It also houses our unlimited potential outpatient mental health program that I spoke about a moment ago, our comprehensive community services program, CCS, which is a program serving people who are in recovery from from substance use needs and who have mental health needs. Electronic monitoring. So we provide an extensive amount of EM services, primarily GPS, and then also what's known as SCRAM, which is an acronym for Secure Continuous Remote Alcohol Monitoring Services. And these are, for the most part, people who are referred to us from the court who need some level of monitoring as a condition of their bail release. And then our forensic services program, which is the conditional release program, and our ORS program as well. And then also our second large campus on 27th North Avenue, where we have about 120 staff. This is a building that we purchased last year because we were expanding so much. So we have a fair amount of staff over there in programs, as you can see also. Our Wraparound Milwaukee program, some CCS programs, our peer specialists. 5 years ago, WCS probably had maybe one or two peer support specialists. And 5 years later, that number has expanded to about 50. So we've really expanded what we do as far as providing peer support services, because we recognize the impact that people who have with lived experience can have on those who are in recovery. Our employment and training programs are also located at that site, and our hub and spoke program as well, which I spoke about a moment ago. Our Waukesha office, which is the main location for WCS at 414 West Moreland Boulevard. And it's the home of approximately 35 to 40 staff, which includes the director of our Waukesha programs and Jefferson County programs as well. Other locations in Milwaukee, Bahia Girls Shelter at 12th and Abert, Bakari Residential Care Center, our Youth Crisis Stabilization Program, which I've spoken about. We also operate a driver's license recovery program, which is located at MATC at 8th and State. Community Improvement and Job Training Program at 7th and North Avenue. That's a program for youth and young adults who are at risk of becoming gang involved, or who are gang involved and are at risk of substance use issues as well. Our Day Reporting Center, which is at 10th and Highland, which for some of you may know that space as the former St. Anthony Hospital. And then our Joshua Glover Residential Reentry Center at 51st and Lisbon Avenue. And our OCA program, which this indicates that it's at 9455 Watertown Plank Road, but that has changed. The inpatient hospital, some of you may know this, that the county operates is closing down. And so OCA has a number of WCS peer specialists, and those peers are now being redeployed to some of the federally qualified community health centers like 16th Street, like outpatient services on East Capitol Drive, Milwaukee Mental Health Services, and there's a fourth one, Progressive, I think, on 34th and Lisbon. So they're being redeployed to those locations. Other locations include Park Lawn Assembly of God, which is the home of our Project Excel, located at Sherman and Fond du Lac, Parsons House, which I've talked about, Rashid Boys Shelter, 25th and Vine, Sankofa Recovery House, which is part of the Outpatient Plus program, which is located at 17th and Atkinson. Swigert House Supportive Housing Project, which is one of our newest halfway houses, and they're located at 24th and Fond du Lac. They provide services for 24 men who are at risk of having their supervision revoked and who have significant substance use needs. And Thurgood Marshall Apartments, which is a harm reduction program for individuals who have chronic alcoholism, and that's located at 6th and Reservoir. And then our Waukesha Day Reporting Center, a Huber facility in Waukesha at 1400 Northview Road. So what's our vision for the future? Continue to have a positive impact, inspiring hope and strength, working with others to create innovative models of behavioral health services and recovery, anticipating emerging needs and provide the most effective community-based alternatives and solutions for justice involved and impacted individuals. Our impact will result in changed minds, recovered lives, and revitalized communities. So how can you help? Well, as a growing organization, we have critical staff positions to fill. If you know someone who may be interested in working with WCS full or part-time for an innovative and progressive organization, please have them log on to our website, www.wis.org, and they can scroll over to the right-hand side of the screen and click on a little box, and they will see a listing of our job openings. So I would encourage you to do that. Some of the most in-demand career opportunities that we have at WCS, I'll just mention a few here. One is our community support program, CSP case manager. Those individuals provide ongoing assessment and treatment planning, case management, supportive psychotherapy, symptom management, medication monitoring, and crisis intervention, including after-hours hotline coverage to persons with serious and persistent mental health and co-occurring substance use issues. Resident monitor, a position that provides support to returning citizens by maintaining a safe, secure, and clean environment, as well as observing residents' interactions during their community activities. And for the RM position, there are both full and part-time opportunities for the CSP case manager, primarily full-time. And a little bit about one of the programs that we're hoping to launch for 2022, Nova House Supportive Housing Program, which is designed to be a step-down program from our Outpatient Plus or Sankofa House. At Sankofa House, you can stay there for about 90 days. But as you can see, as the description here reads, safe, supportive, and dignified housing options for people beginning substance use recovery is critical to their long-term success and recovery. Over 90% of the people served at Sankofa House have identified housing as a major barrier to recovery, and the need for additional supportive housing following the 90-day stay at Sankofa. So what we're hoping to do is to open Nova House at some point this year, and it will be an 18-bed facility serving both adult male and females. And the stay there can be extensive, up to a year. So we're looking for a property. Typically, we look for apartment buildings that have 6 or 8, 10 units. We work to convert those into living units, in this case for 18 people. So if you know anyone who's selling or wants to lease or wants to partner with us to do this project, please send them our way. I'll leave you with this, a success story from one of our programs. This is Mr. Dwayne Mack. WCS is very proud of Dwayne Mack, who's a former resident of Joshua Glover Residential Reentry Center, who completed the Glover program 4 years ago. Mr. Mack remained connected with the program by volunteering his time at the facility, mentoring persons who are transitioning back to the community after a period of incarceration. Dwayne is currently a dedicated certified peer specialist and an inspiring recovery coach in his position in the ED2 recovery program. Mr. Mack's remarkable story has earned him the spotlight as a recipient of the Changing the Narrative Award, hosted at Turner Hall. And now Mr. Mack is the founder, operator, actor of the newly created Mack Productions, one of few African-American theatrical companies to do live stream theater in the city of Milwaukee. And on December 22nd of last year, he led the Christmas play production of All I Want for Christmas Is Me at Turner Hall in Milwaukee. Mr. Mack, by the way, is also going to do the Joshua Glover play for our agency, as well as part of our Black History Month celebration. So I thank you for your time this morning. Appreciate your attention, and happy to answer any questions you might have. So I think I'm going to stop sharing this screen now if I can, if this works. There we go. How's that?
Sorry, took me a minute to mute myself. I am very happy to hear. I have no idea the expansive work that and placements that you have. But I suppose after how many years that probably happened over
110,
time.
right, exactly.
but really very excellent. Let me just say that if you have questions, there's that little hand you can raise under reactions, or you can just wave your hand at us and I keep scrolling through. Gus, if you wouldn't mind looking at the chat and see if there might be something you could share. But in the meantime, as you look, I know you weren't told.
Oh, no, I've got it right there.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, it looks like the first, there's a question from BJ Ermenk, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, asking, do you have programs for released sex offenders? And then also added a link to the wish list for WCS if anyone else wants to go to that.
Yeah, so the question I think I need to answer is around, do we have programs for sex offenders returning to the community from incarceration? Is that, Gus, is that correct?
I think that is what the question is. Right. If the question asker wants to add more detail, they can. I assume they're still in the group.
All right, okay. So yeah, the answer is no, we really don't. We do serve sex offenders as part of a number of our programs, whether largely in our residential reentry centers, Swigert, Glover, Parsons, and also in our conditional release program and in our ORS program, which, by the way, the acronym stands for Opening Avenues for Reentry Success. So we do serve individuals who are sex offenders in those programs, though we don't necessarily have treatment that's targeted for them. So that is provided by someone else, but they're working with WCS for other kinds of programming.
Thank you. Let's see, there was, just to tag along with Gus here, there is a question at the very beginning, and that was, can you tell us a little more about your background?
Well, where do I start? So I am from Milwaukee, and have born and raised here, and have spent my professional career working in nonprofits and governments. So I actually started my career working as a teenager, working at a small neighborhood center, settlement house, a neighborhood house in Milwaukee, many years ago. And I was actually, as I tell the story, I was seeking alternatives to traditional education one day. I was actually skipping school, and and so I was with a friend, and we came across this building, neighborhood house, and so we went inside and told the person who met us we were looking for work, and we were just kidding. And so he gave us a tour of the building. I'd always had this inclination around social work, and so I probably asked him a number of questions. So I was in gym class the next week, and I get a phone call. I'm thinking, well, calling me, and it was one of my parents. It was a person that gave us a tour. Said, Clarence, I want to offer you a job with the condition that you get involved with our teen program. And so I happily accepted that condition, worked there for 5 years. And probably that experience was one that led me on a path to finishing high school, going on to undergrad and graduate school. And as I mentioned earlier, my first job out of undergraduate school was at Wisconsin Community Services, then Wisconsin Correctional Services. I spent 3 years there. I supervised a mental health clinic. I did pretrial work. I left, went back to school. I worked for an organization called Bell Therapy after that. I worked for a number of nonprofits, Goodwill Industries. I spent 6 years managing the county's child welfare programs. I spent a couple of years with the YWCA overseeing their W-2 programs, and served as part of that time as a consultant in New York, working with the mayor's office. So then I actually returned to Neighborhood House Milwaukee about 20 years ago as the executive director. So I come full circle. And my predecessor, Holly Patzer, who was one of your parishioners, Holly hired me about 11 years ago to return to WCS as the associate executive director, which I did for about 7 years. And when she retired, I succeeded her. And Holly was an absolute delightful person to work with and for. And so that's my story. I've been very fortunate. And you just sort of learn a lot as you move along in your career. Never expecting that I'd be doing this. And I'm fortunate to work in an organization that has great people, wonderful leaders, great staff, a terrific mission, our board. While it's in one ways, there's some pride in the fact that we're able to expand and meet community need. But on the other hand, you wish that there wasn't as much need out there. And so, really, I firmly believe that we have to do more with, whether it's social policy or social determinants of health, infrastructure issues, to really create a level playing field so people don't end up, whether it's incarcerated or having significant mental health needs, that bring them into contact with the WCS or the public mental health systems. So, or public behavioral health system, I should say. So I have three adult children, grandson. Met my wife when I worked for Neighborhood House as a teenager years ago. So that's kind of my story.
Thank you for sharing. As someone connected with the schools, I love your definition of seeking alternative education sources in your teens. Let me just make a note that BJ has entered the web connection to your website for the wish list. So if there are things that you'd like to know that you can do personally, or maybe as a group that you can coordinate, there is monetary donations and a wish list on the website. So I also wanted to let you know I did enter Clarence's email address, so maybe we'll overcome you with emails. And and the website is also on the chat. I left you kind of hanging, Gus, and I don't mean to. Did you want to read one of the other questions on chat, or did you want a little time to look?
That's just fine. Bruce asked, what other organizations do you most closely work with or collaborate with?
What other organizations do we most work closely with? I would say we work a lot with government. So Milwaukee County, we do a lot of work with Milwaukee County, with Waukesha County as well. We do a lot with the State Department of Corrections and a lot with the State Department of Health Services, as well as the Department of Children and Families. So those are, at least in the public space, organizations we work very closely with. We also work very closely with WAFCA, Wisconsin Association for Family and Child Agencies. We work a lot with an organization called Running Rebels in Milwaukee, with Lad Lake. They're located, I think they're in Dousman. And a lot of work with just smaller community-based organizations. We do a lot of work with Employment Milwaukee. They're located in our building at 27th and North Avenue. So yeah, and we're open to partnering with any organization that does work that's similar, or things that we can do which would enhance what they're doing or what we're doing. So we really believe in community partnerships.
Thank you. I see that someone has their hand up, and then we can come back to something from the chat, Gus. But Joanne has her hand up, and as soon as she unmutes herself, there she is.
Okay, well, Clarence, I'm really interested in seeing all the programs. I actually worked as work study back at UWM in the 70s when it was a tiny organization.
Yeah.
But what I'm concerned about is, I'm sure you saw in the paper that a baby starved to death in Milwaukee not long ago. And there were several people, many of them connected with government, that interacted with that family. Have you thought about what could have been done to prevent or to stop that, and what could be, done to prevent this sort of thing from happening in the future?
Well, I mean, that's a really good question. And unfortunately, there are no panaceas. What I would suggest we need to do much more of, and I mentioned this a moment ago, in terms of we have a broken infrastructure, so we don't do enough preventative kinds of things. So by that I mean getting involved with the families early on, providing services early on. We have systems that are overwhelmed, whether in this case it's the child welfare system, and so oftentimes they're taking the cases that seem to be the most egregious. If we can start connecting those families with community-based organizations like a neighborhood house or other settlement houses, organizations that really sort of organically occur in communities, then I think we'll be able to be much more effective in reaching families that are at risk, especially those we know mom or dad or caregivers perhaps have some behavioral health concerns, whether it's mental health needs or substance use needs. But just providing those services early on, being much more involved in prevention. The resources that have been allocated for prevention services have diminished over time because we're spending so much more at the back end, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's our prison system, mm-hmm. whether it's in our foster care system. So shifting resources or allocating more resources toward the front end, toward front-end system improvements, and also creating better conditions in communities in which families live. I think those are answers, potential solutions that will just be more effective in preventing things that you described.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gus, did you come up with a question to ask from chat, something?
It appears that the last one, which is kind of in line with what we've been talking about, is from Bruce again, saying, do you see WCS as part of the move to have police do less responding to mental health situations, domestic violence, etc.? Are you working with the MK Common Council and MK Police and Sheriff's Departments to accomplish this? So when you're talking about that kind of preventative and infrastructure building as opposed to responding and punishing, is that something that you're working with Milwaukee government to accomplish?
A great question, and the answer is yes, absolutely. We actually have the city of Milwaukee chief of police as a member of our board of directors, Jeffrey Norman, and I talked about the growth that we have had over the past 4 or 5 years with peer supports or peer specialists. And peers are really effective in terms of getting and engaging people who are in crisis, so they don't end up with contacts with law enforcement officials or in hospitals, but that they are diverted into a less restrictive level of response or care that doesn't involve law enforcement. So the CLASS program, which I talked about earlier, is designed to, as people are getting out of the inpatient hospital or leaving one of the crisis stabilization houses, excuse me, that we connect one of our peers with them to minimize the possibility that they might go into another crisis, which could lead to being rehospitalized or law enforcement involved. And so, yes, getting involved earlier, excuse me, when there's the potential for a crisis is something that WCS is very, very involved with. And I think the expansion in our work with peer supports really emphasizes that.
I will flip over to a hand raised, but then if you look and find another question, Gus, we'll come back to you after that, okay? Okay, BJ has her hand up. Thought of something else, huh, BJ?
I did. I am a member of the Wauwatosa Committee for Citizens with Disabilities. And as part of that, we have a woman, Deb Pollack, from the Milwaukee County Committee for Citizens with Disabilities. And when you mentioned a growing need for proactive action and working on preventive things, I wonder if that is a group that you work with, and or how you might utilize their information, or even how the Wauwatosa Committee might support you.
Well, I don't, and one of the things, excuse me, I have a little dry throat here. One of the things that probably, I guess I have to just sort of realize and recognize is that I don't always know everything that's happening at WCS because we do have so many staff and different programs. So we could, in fact, be working with the Wauwatosa office. I'm not aware of that, but we absolutely would love to. So if you want to connect me with someone from that office or the Milwaukee office, we'd absolutely love to work with them.
Definitely, because one of the things that both the county and Wauwatosa committees are trying to bring to the fore and educate more people on is the number of people with invisible mental disabilities, behavioral disabilities, and especially how a lot of them do have parental help. And we are trying to reach out to them from multiple angles. So this would be great. I will be happy to send you an email. Thank you.
I look forward to getting it.
Thanks, BJ.
Thank you, BJ.
Okay, Gus, what did you find?
There's also a question from you, which is, how has WCS accommodated and been impacted by COVID over the past, 2 or so years?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. We've been impacted significantly. We provide a lot of essential services. So unlike a lot of organizations, we couldn't just close our doors and have our staff, sort of working from home or lay them off. So we've had to, obviously, like many others, had to accommodate our staff and those who serve by doing more remote work or virtual work. Just keeping our staff safe by providing a lot of personal protective equipment or PPE. So those are the kinds of things where we can limit the number of services the number of service contacts that we provide. We've done that in an effort to keep our staff and those that we serve safe. We operate a number, as you have seen earlier, residential-based programs that we simply could not shut down. So we've adopted a lot of protocol in those environments, so a lot of mask wearing, hand sanitizing, social distancing. Recently, an increase in testing. We have protocols that require that those who we serve who test positive, that we have them isolated for a period of time. If our staff test positive, we have them obviously at home. We took advantage of the federal government's COVID, and I can't think of the name of the legislation now, but it allowed employers to provide time off for COVID-related illnesses and also for childcare issues. When that ended, which ended, I think, I want to say at the end of October, we began offering that to our staff. So we give them additional time. I think it's up to 5 days a week for COVID-related illness that we're just paying for. We've given our staff appreciation pay for their continued work, especially early in 2020 and even throughout much of 2021. We'll probably do that again because of the recent surge. So yeah, we've had to just pivot big time And I will say that that's the last 2 years have been very stressful. You know, we thought we might see a decline in some of the COVID-related circumstances last year. We saw some early on, but those unfortunately were not, you know, as robust as we would have liked. And so now we're almost not quite back at square one because we have vaccinations, but we're still challenged by the impact of COVID. There's no question about that. We do a lot of telework now in terms of providing therapy sessions virtually. You know, whatever you might imagine, you know, we've had to pivot and provide because the services we can't just stop providing. So we have to find more safe ways to do that. And I think we've been pretty effective in doing that. We'd much rather not be in that COVID environment. But, you know, here we are. And so, does that answer the question?
Certainly does. I just want to check in with you, Clarence. Do you think with your dry throat, could you handle 2 more questions?
Sure. No, I'm fine.
Okay. And maybe just final talk. We probably have maybe 5 or 8 minutes yet for our usual closure, but if that works for you, okay.
Sure, of course.
All right. Gus, there is one last question here from Molly. Do you have that in front of you?
I do.
Okay.
Molly Schiffler asks, does WCF have connections to literacy tutoring programs? And adds that she's very impressed with the scope of the programs you offer.
Great questions. We've searched high and low. We have our Project Excel program, which is a combination of it. So it houses a program called Aspire, which is a program for youth, for adjudicated youth who have academic deficiencies. And we also work with them to develop career and vocational options. And part of that is to provide academic tutoring for them. And so for a while, we worked with LSW, I think it's Literacy Services of Wisconsin. You know, that worked for a while. Unfortunately, they couldn't continue. So we've just started working with this gentleman to actually create this space for us where we have volunteers coming in to work with the youth in that program. But we certainly could use more resources. We don't do a lot of literacy services for adults. We work with others to do that. I mean, you asked earlier who we partner with. Well, LSW sort of is one of those for adults. But for our youth, yes, we could certainly use more support there as well. And also at our Bakari Residential Care Center, the kids are obviously, they're staying with us 24 hours a day. And we provide education on site. That's provided by Norris Academy, another partner. I keep forgetting these partners. But certainly if there are those in the community who want to get more involved, especially tutoring youth, there certainly is an opportunity for you.
Thank you. And when last question, although there might be others floating around, we just have time for one more. Dennis, you had your hand up.
Yes, really impressed with WCS and all the work. And you've been involved for so many years, and from somebody from Milwaukee with the remedial end of things. And from your perspective, and I'm sure you could talk to us another whole hour on this, but kind of briefly, what are some of the main things that could be done, should be done, from the city of Milwaukee's perspective to really benefit and help out the African-American minority communities here in Milwaukee, whether you're talking about legislation or whatever?
Well, that's Dennis, that's a really great question. You know, I think a lot of it really begins with, I think, you know, housing circumstances that we have for those in our community. We have to really improve housing stock. You know, we've created this concentration of people who are under-resourced and, you know, underprivileged, unfortunately, and we have to really look at how we change that. We have a community that's probably over-policed, and when you have an over-policed community, you have more of an opportunity for being arrested, and getting involved with the criminal justice system. And we also have in the city of Milwaukee a significant problem with drugs and alcohol, right? And other behavioral health issues, but certainly drug and alcohol concerns. So how do we begin to address those in a very forceful way? Because it's the underpinning for so many things, whether it's drug selling, getting kids involved in drugs earlier. But I think what at the end of the day, what it comes down to is we don't do enough to really nurture and raise, I guess, strong families. You know, families raise children and communities nurture families. And in the city of Milwaukee, you know, we obviously have this growing divide of those who have and those who do not. We have disproportionate levels of crime and violence, trauma, and those are things that we are going to have to fix. And I always say that being a lifetime city of Milwaukee resident and being an African American, Black folks have seen poverty for decades, for many years. But I don't think the Black community has been as disparaged as it is right now in terms of the standpoint of violence and crimes and drugs and alcohol. And those are the kinds of things that we have to change. So now there's really a poverty of thought, a poverty of hope, a poverty of the mind, a poverty of education. You know, though, and there are no easy, quick fixes. I mean, there just simply are not. There are infrastructure issues. There are issues around social determinants of health. Those are the kinds of, you know, trauma, which is significant, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's exposure to drugs and alcohol. Those are the kinds of structural things that we have to work on fixing. I think a lot can be done working more closely with education, because kids are in schools, or at least they were up until 2 years ago, 8-9 hours a day. How do we take advantage of that time? How do we get kids who are more engaged and connected with schools? How do we get their parents more connected with schools? Now, these are long-term fixes that we're talking about, but they can be done. These are things that are within our reach. We have to, you know, get much more involved with the faith-based community. So yeah, there is a lot of work that needs to be done, and there are a lot of things that we can do if we have the will to do it, and we have our policymakers on board with these kinds of things, law enforcement, educators, and also business leaders, right, from other communities, you know, who really need to understand that Milwaukee is a vital resource for the state, and Milwaukee Central City is a vital part of the city of Milwaukee, and that includes many families of color.
Jumping in without being called on, just to say that every dollar we invest in early childhood, high quality childcare
Absolutely
has an enormous, it is the absolute best investment of our tax dollars.
Yes. Well said. No, Patricia, you're absolutely right on. No question.
I don't know, Gus, here I am jumping in, asking you did you want to express any thoughts from the youth group about being honored with this presence today? And,
Yes.
And then I'll close and have Clarence say a few words.
Sounds great. Yeah. Thank you to everyone for coming. Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for voicing your presentation, and the things that you have to say are very valuable, especially for people that plan on getting involved in that kind of infrastructural work, moving away from punishment and reactionary infrastructure into stuff that builds people up. I know that I found it very valuable, and thank you for coming. We really appreciate it.
No, you're welcome. Happy to be here.
I second and third and fourth that. That's very, very good. Thank you. Thank you. Just a quick thing, couple things in the chat. You can cut and paste things that are in the chat. So we're going to close in a little bit, but you have some time to zip on through some of the chat things and cut and paste those. We had over 24 people attending today, and I thank you all once again for supporting the Sunday Forum and for supporting our speaker today. And I think that's it. And I thank you to the youth group, and just a few words, and we thank you for being with us, Clarence.
No, Lorraine, thank you for inviting me. Gus, also, I really appreciate the chance to speak with you this morning and into the afternoon. And I would just say, I think the fact that you all invited me to be a part of your forum, I think speaks volumes as to the kinds of things that you want to be involved with and hear about. And that's really what has to happen. Our community, this is one large community. We all have, different parts of it. But I can't stress enough the importance of working together and getting people involved who wouldn't perhaps normally or organically come into contact with the kind of work that WCS does or other organizations like WCS. But being aware of the challenges that we have and the people that we serve it's critical because there are too many individuals, who can easily ignore what's going on. And, the world isn't perfect. We're always going to have some level of crime and, mental health needs and people incarcerated. But, this is a rich country. We have far too many people incarcerated and a lot of people incarcerated who have behavioral health needs who we should be addressing those much earlier. And those are the kinds of conversations that we need to have more of. We've become a very myopic world. Focus on 1 and 2 year budget cycles versus stepping back and looking at, how do we begin to ameliorate some of these challenges at a much earlier time? And how do we get more people involved? How do we share resources, share wealth? These are the conversations of tomorrow. And so I'm really happy that the youth group is as involved as they are because you guys are the future. And it's easy for some young people to, who are having wonderful lives to just sort of look the other way. But your voice and your commitment is incredibly important and necessary to truly make a difference.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I believe we need to close, but I see clapping and lots of writing in chat to thank you too. So
you're welcome.
Thank you, Clarence.
Look forward to being in touch with you all soon. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.